Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're going to be studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 10, which is titled The Buddha's Way. We're going to be studying chapters 31 through 40 today. This is going to help you to be able to understand what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach. This is taught more as a study group, where all the other classes and courses and retreats that I share, I teach those in a more traditional style, where this one is typically with students who have already been studying the foundational teachings, and now they're coming to this particular class to kind of fill in the framework or the foundation that they've already started to develop. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly, and at the same time invite you to read for our class or ask questions or any way that you would like to actually participate. Because this particular class is done, like I mentioned, a bit different than our others, where what I do is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read one of our chapters. And then after someone reads a chapter, I will share some teachings on that and then open up to any and all questions that you guys have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. You can ask questions by putting that into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand electronically and unmute your microphone, and then you can ask any and all questions that you like. And if you'd like to volunteer to read, you can do the same thing. You can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then you'll be able to read today's chapter, whichever ones you volunteer for. So it looks like Pat has volunteered for our first one, which is chapter 31. If you'd like to go ahead, sir.
Thank you. To proclaim stream entry to yourself. Householder, when the fivefold guilty dread is eliminated in a noble disciple and he is possessed of the four limbs of stream entry, and has well seen and well penetrated the noble discipline by wisdom, he may, if he so aspires, himself proclaim thus of himself, I am one who has cut off the doom of hell, of rebirth in the womb of an animal, in the realm of afflicted spirits. Cut off is the waste, the ill-born, the downfall. A stream enterer am I, one not doomed to the downfall, assured, bound for enlightenment. Now, householder, what is the fivefold guilty dread that is eliminated in him? 1. It is that guilty dread, householder, which he who kills causes in the same visible state as a result of his killing. It is that guilty dread about the life to come, which he knows who kills causes. Also that discontentedness and sadness which he experiences. By abstaining from killing, he causes no guilty dread in the same visible state, nor for the life to come. He experiences no discontentedness and sadness. Thus, in him who abstains from killing, that guilty dread is eliminated. 2. It is that guilty dread, householder, which he who takes what is not given causes in this same visible state, as a result of his taking what is not given. It is that guilty dread about life to come, which he who takes what is not given causes. Also that discontentedness and sadness which he experiences. By abstaining from taking what is not given, he causes no guilty dread in the same visible state, nor for the life to come. He experiences no discontentedness and sadness. Thus in him who abstains from taking what is not given, that guilty dread is eliminated. 3. It is that guilty dread, householder, which he who is a wrongdoer in sexual desires causes in the same visible state as a result of his being a wrongdoer in sexual desires. It is that guilty dread about the life to come, which he who is a wrongdoer in sexual desires causes. Also that discontentedness and sadness which he experiences. By abstaining from being a wrongdoer in sexual desires, he causes no guilty dread in this same visible state, nor for the life to come. He experiences no discontentedness and sadness. Thus in him who abstains from being a wrongdoer in sensual desires, that guilty dread is eliminated. 4. It is that guilty dread, householder, which he who tells lies causes in the same visible state as a result of his telling lies. It is that guilty dread about the life to come, which he who tells lies causes. Also that discontentedness and sadness which he experiences. By abstaining from telling lies, he causes no guilty dread in the same visible state, nor for the life to come he experiences no discontentedness and sadness. Thus in him who abstains from telling lies, that guilty dread is eliminated. 5. It is that guilty dread, householder, which he who is under the influence of liquor fermented and distilled and so given to heedlessness, the guilty dread which, as a result of these things, he causes in this same visible state, also about the life to come, also that discontentedness and sadness, these are not possible for him who abstains from occasions or places for taking liquor fermented and distilled. Thus, in him who abstains, that guilty dread is eliminated. These are the 5 guilty dreads that are eliminated. And of what 4 limbs of stream entry does he possess? 1. Herein, householder, the noble disciple is possessed of unwavering confidence in the perfectly enlightened one thus. The perfectly enlightened one is an arahant, perfectly enlightened, accomplished in true wisdom and conduct, fortunate, knower of the worlds, unsurpassed leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of heavenly beings and humans, the enlightened one. 2. He is possessed of unwavering confidence in the teachings thus. The teachings are well expounded by the perfectly enlightened one, directly visible, immediate, inviting one to come and see, applicable to be personally experienced by the wise. 3. He is possessed of unwavering confidence in the community thus. The community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is practicing the wholesome way, practicing the straight way, practicing the true way, practicing the proper way. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 types of individuals. This community of the perfectly enlightened one's disciples is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of respectful salutation, the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. 4. He is possessed of the virtues dear to the noble ones. In the virtues dear to the noble ones, unbroken, untorn, unblemished, unblotched, liberating, praised by the wise, not misunderstood, and leading to concentration. These 4 limbs of stream entry he possesses. And what in him is the noble discipline that is well seen and well penetrated by wisdom. Herein, householder, the noble disciple thus reflects, this being that is, by arising of this, that arises. This not being, this is not. By the ending of this, that comes to be eliminated. That is to say, because of ignorance, because of the volitional formations, consciousness becomes, because of consciousness, name and form. Because of name and form, the 6 sense bases. Because of the 6 sense bases, contact. Because of contact, feeling. Because of feeling, craving. Because of craving, clinging. Because of clinging, existence. Because of existence, birth. Because of birth, aging and death. Grief, displeasure and pain, sadness and despair come into being. Thus is the arising of this whole mass of discontentedness. But with the diminishing and complete elimination without remainder of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, the ending of the volitional formations, with the ending of the volitional formations, the ending of consciousness, with the ending of consciousness, the ending of name and form, with the ending of name and form, the ending of the 6 sense bases, with the ending of the 6 sense bases, the ending of contact, with the ending of contact, the ending of feeling, with the ending of feeling, the ending of craving, with the ending of craving, the ending of clinging, with the ending of clinging, the ending of existence, with the ending of existence, the ending of birth, with the ending of birth, aging and death, grief, displeasure and pain, sadness and despair are eliminated to become. Thus is the ending of this whole mass of discontentedness, and this for him is the noble discipline well seen, well penetrated by wisdom. Now, householder, since for the noble disciple these 5 guilty dreads are eliminated, and he is possessed of these 4 limbs of stream entry, and for him this noble discipline is well seen and well penetrated by wisdom. He, if he so aspires, himself may proclaim of himself, destroyed is hell for me, destroyed is birth in the womb of an animal, destroyed is the realm of afflicted spirits, destroyed is rebirth in the waste, the ill-born, the downfall in hell. A stream enterer am I, one not doomed to the downfall, one assured, bound for enlightenment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this is a discourse where the Buddha is laying out some things that a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment would be understanding and also practicing. So that's what a stream enterer is. If you've entered the stream, you've entered into the first stage of enlightenment. And there's 4 stages of enlightenment. There's 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through called the jhanas that you'll experience, which are heightened qualities of mind before the mind goes into the first stage of enlightenment. The Buddha referred to it as stream entry or stream enterer because just like a log enters the stream, it will eventually get to the ocean. The same thing is true that once you get into the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So the Buddha here is laying out these things that an individual who's in the first stage of enlightenment would be practicing. And he says, once you're practicing these, and there's other things as well besides this particular discourse, that this individual can proclaim of themselves, meaning they can know for themselves, right? You're not going to go out into the world and proclaim that I am a stream enterer, right? You're not going to put it on your Facebook page and, call up your mom and be like, hey, mom, guess what? Aren't you proud of me? I'm a stream enterer, right? This isn't something that you would do because that would be conceit and arrogance. And that's exactly the opposite of what an enlightened being or someone aspiring for enlightenment would be practicing. So what the Buddha is saying is these are the things that you would need to be practicing in order to know that you are actually in that first stage of enlightenment. And it's not just these. That's why it's important to make sure you don't look at the teachings of the Buddha in isolation. You need to look at the totality of his teachings because he'll teach like maybe 3, 4, 5, even 10 or 20 different discourses of explaining all the different things that you need to be able to learn and understand and practice in order to be able to get to this first stage of enlightenment and beyond. So here, this is giving you a glimpse into some of the things that you need to practice in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And the first thing he's talking about is essentially the 5 precepts. That if you're practicing the 5 precepts, you would have already learned those in his teachings where he describes the 5 precepts in details. You would have reflected on those to independently verify them, and you would be deeply practicing them. And you wouldn't be making any mistakes in regards to the 5 precepts in terms of any missteps. So it's important to keep in mind that the 5 precepts are not black and white, right? Oftentimes people teach them as no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. And for those of you guys that have studied the original words of the Buddha, you know that he didn't teach that way. He taught with much more illuminating language. So here, when the Buddha says one who kills, it's not like if you just kill one being that all of a sudden you're not a stream enterer anymore. Because in a situation where like you're in your house and you're asleep and at 3 a.m. someone breaks into the window and comes into your house, you might need to stop this harm from coming at you. And it wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings if you just let this being sit there and stab you with a knife or kill you. So it's not that you would never, ever, 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 ever kill anything. It's that you're not going to initiate the killing. You're not going to think thoughts of going out into the world and actually actively killing another being based on your own choices of, I want to go kill something right now, right? And then the same thing with all these others. These aren't black and white. And if you haven't learned the 5 precepts with me and using the words of the Buddha, that's something that you're going to need to be able to do in order to be able to practice these 5 precepts really closely. But notice what the Buddha says here. He's saying and helping you to be able to see that through practicing these 5 precepts, you won't have this guilty dread, right? What that is where there's no guilt in the mind. There isn't this discontentedness or sadness. Because if you're going out into the world and regularly killing or stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, or taking substances that cause heedlessness, the mind's going to have discontentedness and sadness. But when you know the truth about these natural laws and you can go out into the world and making wise decisions, you won't have that guilty dread because you'll know that you're making wise decisions based on this natural law of karma. So that's the first part where he's saying a stream enterer is going to be practicing the 5 precepts. And that's really helpful because I've talked with people before that think a stream enterer is still using drugs and alcohol. I've heard that from people before that aren't studying the teachings closely. So you might hear that from people, but you can see in the words of the Buddha exactly what he's teaching here. And then the 4 limbs of stream entry. What this is the 4 things that a stream enterer is going to be practicing, which is they're going to have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, and they're going to have a well-developed moral conduct practice. So having confidence in the Buddha is that when you're first getting on the path, you might have doubt in the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of. That's normal. But as you're learning and practicing these teachings, as you're spending time and associating more and more with the individuals in your community, you're going to be seeing improvement to the condition of the mind. And this is where your confidence in his teachings come in. So you'll ultimately gain confidence in the Buddha, in the teachings, in the community that you're part of, because you'll see the condition of the mind improving. Because it's not just the teacher that you're learning from, you're also learning from other members of the community. When you're seeing people practicing wholesome moral conduct, when you see people practicing generosity, when you're seeing people practice loving kindness and compassion, it's like, oh, wow, I really like how that person's doing that. And that's something that you can then incorporate into your practice without even necessarily letting that person know. So by associating with wholesome individuals, you will gain wisdom on this path, and more you'll have confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, because you're seeing improvement to the condition of the mind. And as part of that also, you will have developed a certain amount of wholesome moral conduct. This is taught in the Eightfold Path: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Because as long as you're putting out harm through your moral conduct, that harm is going to come back to you. So it's important to bring your moral conduct up to the level that you see in the Eightfold Path. Because it's kind of like if you had a pipe and it was spewing oil and it bursted and it's spewing oil all over the place, you're not going to go clean up the mess on the floor first. You got to shut down that pipe. So it's the same thing as if your moral conduct is such that you're not using right speech, right action, and right livelihood. It's like spewing oil all over the world, and now it's creating a big mess. And you'd like to shut that down as soon as possible. So the Buddha used to teach right view, which is the Four Noble Truths, first, and then right away he would guide students to improve their moral conduct so you can shut down the unwholesome gamma that you're producing through your moral conduct. So these are the first two things, the 5 precepts and these 4 limbs of stream entry. Then an individual who's in the first stage of enlightenment would have understood and penetrated into dependent origination. I taught this back in volume 5, chapter 14, but we're actually going to be revisiting that in this class because it shows up in this book as well. So the dependent origination is the 12 interlinking steps that is showing the detail of exactly why you keep experiencing discontentedness over and over, and why you keep coming back into the world over and over and over again. Where the Four Noble Truths gives you like a little window into understanding the unenlightened mind in 4 simple statements that can be independently verified, dependent origination shows the detail. So if you ever had like a math teacher that was like, okay, you got the answer, but show me your work. That's what dependent origination is. It's the work. And it's showing you detail by detail of what leads from one thing to the other. And since we're going to be exploring this in this particular class, I won't go through the detail of this, but just understand that a stream enter, someone in the first stage of enlightenment, will know dependent origination. And they'll be able to look at it and understand it. They'll be able to see very clearly what each one of those causes and conditions are that are leading to discontentedness and also rebirth as well. The Buddha describes that a stream enter will actually memorize the dependent origination, the 12 interlinking steps. So that's something that you might decide to work on as well. So the Buddha is saying, okay, if you've accomplished these things, this individual is now potentially in this first stage of enlightenment. But there's other things too, like the elimination of the first 3 fetters. There's accomplishment in generosity. There's accomplishment in view. There's a whole number of things. And that's why once a year I teach a retreat in January that is everything you would need to get to the first stage of enlightenment, where I've consolidated everything in that one retreat so that when you're looking at different discourses like this, you don't just take them in isolation, but you can see the totality of what the Buddha taught that actually leads to the first stage of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter 31 in volume 10. Looks like we have a few questions coming in on Zoom. So we'll start with Samantha first. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I have just a general question about the 4 limbs of stream entry. So, I've only been studying with you for a couple of years, so I haven't fully investigated the Buddha's teachings and whatnot. So at this point, I feel very confident in what I have seen and learned. I don't have any doubts, but is it safe to say that I have unwavering confidence at this point, having not actually fully investigated, or is it just a feeling at the time that I'm feeling, yeah, I feel good about this. I feel confident. I haven't seen anything yet that would dissuade me that, there's anything here that's not true. I'm just not sure that I've studied long enough to use the word unwavering.
Yeah, if that's the case, then, that's not where the mind is right now, and that's okay, right? Because this is a journey that an individual is going to gradually take. Because right now you might not have any doubt about anything you've seen so far, but like you're saying, you haven't seen everything, and you're not going to necessarily see everything because it's 45 volumes, right, in this thick. But you don't need everything from the Pali Canon to be able to get to enlightenment, and also everything you need to get to enlightenment actually isn't in the Pali Canon. We've lost some things along the way, and that's why one of the reasons why it's so important to learn with a teacher. But this unwavering confidence is that you'd be completely solid. It doesn't matter what somebody says, without a doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind, improved condition of life. And if that's where you are, then that's where you are. And if you're not, then that's fine too. You just need to be able to learn and grow and develop and train your mind more to see more stability, see more clarity, see more concentration and focus, see more peacefulness and joy coming into the mind. Typically, as somebody's getting into the jhanas, that's where this unwavering confidence comes in, because being on the path to enlightenment or off the path to enlightenment and being in those jhanas, it's like night and day, because you experience these heightened qualities of mind. And that's where someone's like, whoa, there's something very different about this mind than I used to experience. And once you start experiencing that, that's where the confidence really comes in. And even when you start reading what the jhanas are and you start noticing that your mind is experiencing those exact qualities, it gets real quick, because here's a document, here's a book, here's the words of the Buddha that are reportedly from the Buddha, that he spoke and uttered out of his mouth 2,500 years ago. And it's been through 2,500 years of history. And now you've practiced what he taught, and you're noticing that your mind is experiencing the very things that are written down on this page. And it's like, whoa, you didn't even necessarily know that this was possible. And here's a document describing the very things that you're experiencing. That's where the confidence really gets strong and solid. So I can't tell you whether you are having unwavering confidence or not. Only you are going to know that. So it sounds like you're saying that you can't consider what you have in terms of your level of confidence as unwavering. So that means that, there's more things that you'd like to get exposed to, maybe more progress that you would like to experience on the path, and then ultimately you might get to that point.
Okay, actually, I do feel like I have unwavering confidence. I just wasn't sure if one needed to, fully investigate everything that the Buddha taught in order to be able to say it's unwavering. I mean, I have this tremendous benefit. I haven't seen anything yet that would lead me to not be confident. I just wasn't sure how long one needed to learn before they could say unwavering.
Yeah, there's no length of time, and there's no amount of material that, is a kind of a predetermined thing. It's really a case-by-case basis based in your own understanding and your own perspective, based on your experiences and what you experience day to day. So you don't have to see all of the content of the Pali Canon to be able to get to that unwavering confidence. Typically, like I mentioned, it's coming in once you start experiencing significant progress and you notice with your own mind, like, whoa, this is very different than what I've experienced at any other time during my life. And it's these teachings that led to that. So now, like, let's just say you're at the land office, the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, and you're sitting down and someone's like, hey, have you ever heard of the teachings of the Buddha? Like, what are those things all about? And you're like, oh, whatever you say is what you say. But in your mind, you're thinking, oh, those things are real. They're legit. They actually really work. And if you know that, that's your unwavering confidence that no matter what somebody says to you, you know that these teachings work with 100% certainty.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I do feel they're legit. I liked how you said that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll kind of update the words of the Buddha a little bit here.
Thank you.
All right. So it looks like Vibhav has a question.
Thank you, David. I had a question on the 5 precepts about the killing part, specifically in the case of self-defense. And you said, in some cases you may end up causing harm, or self-defense cases and you'll be perfectly okay. There's also teaching of the Buddha where he says that we should have loving kindness for every being that is, even if they're harming you, even if they are cutting off your limbs. And so I was wondering how you would be able to harm a person while having that kind of loving kindness for them.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of some other, it's not, I don't know how valid it is, but like you read about some of the monks in Myanmar who were, or wherever they were jailed by the authorities, that they were still practicing compassion and loving kindness for people who jail them.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, but if there's this extreme teaching of the Buddha where he says it's okay you should still have loving kindness with people, even if people are cutting off your limbs.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be slightly, I don't know how much conflict, but where does the line saying, okay, that's okay to harm and self-defense, but still how do I have loving kindness to someone and then still cause him harm? I guess my
what you're asking is not in conflict with what I'm sharing and what the Buddha taught. You're just not seeing it. So what the Buddha teaches in that discourse is that if somebody was sawing you, if two criminals were sawing you limb by limb with a two-handed saw, if hatred rose up in the mind, he says you wouldn't be practicing my teachings, right? That if you hated these beings, right? So you can actually choose to live compassionately for this being who you are without hating others. So if somebody came at you with a knife or a gun, you can choose to defend this being who you are by practicing loving kindness and compassion and not having hate towards this other being, because your mind isn't hating them. Instead, you're practicing loving kindness in order to protect this being. And what I suggest that people do in that case is to cause the least amount of harm as possible to stop this attack from coming. So this is where it's in sync, but you're just not seeing that the idea of having hatred in the mind or not having hatred in the mind and defending yourself is something that someone who's trained their mind would be able to do, that you can actually defend this being without having any hatred in your mind. And that would still be a practice of the first precept, where you're living compassionately for all living beings, and you're also practicing loving kindness as well, because there's no hatred. In fact, in this situation, we might call it harm, right? That this individual's coming at you, and now you're having to cause harm in order to stop this harm from coming to you, right? But the way that I view that is that is actually, yes, you have to harm this physical body of the other person, but it's producing wholesome karma. That's how you know that it's a wise decision. Because if you just allow this person to attack you, this being dies and now you're dead. That's the unwholesome karma of just sitting there and doing nothing. But if this person's attacking you and you defend this being, and now you just say, for example, you have to kill this individual, unfortunately, you've just produced wholesome karma, because now this being is going to stay alive in this situation. So it's important to be able to see the distinction here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. And then Denise, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for that, for your explanations. And I was going to talk about the unwavering confidence, and I will, but I just wanted to just say this. When I first started studying Buddhism, I was a bit concerned about what I was going to become, because I've always been quite open to challenging things that are not right. So, but what I learned was that as long as you said, as long as there isn't hatred, as long as you can nurture your heart enough, then you can still speak out. You can still challenge people. is where it's coming from. Sometimes that's okay for me, but sometimes I still find that there is an issue. Like where I am, there isn't much concern about the environment. So there's a lot of use of plastic bags. And I find myself kind of arguing with people who sell in the shops quite a bit. So I try and work on that. So it's good that you remind us that we're not just turning into doormats. And as long as your heart is in the right place, it's okay. Did you want to say? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, if you're going to do those kinds of things, you would like to always use, right intention, right speech, and right action. And this practice isn't about going out and changing other people. It's about the choices that you make. So like here in Thailand, they use a lot of plastic bags. I choose not to as much as possible, but I don't go out and try to convince other people to use these not use plastic bags. But what I have done in some rare occasions is like I order food from this Indian restaurant, and when I used to order a certain dish, they would put it in styrofoam. And one of the things we would get it delivered, and I would say, is it possible for you guys to use some other packaging besides styrofoam whenever I order this? And they said, actually, yeah, we can. So they started using paper bags instead. So rather than tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing or try to convince them of anything, I just asked them, is it possible when I order this to use this particular packaging? And what I noticed is they switched their packaging for everybody. So rather than try to convince them, I just requested it for myself, and then they on their own chose to switch the packaging. So you would like to be sure that you're 100% accurate, that you're not a doormat, you're not just passive, You can go out into the world and talk with people, but you would like to do it skillfully, where you're not demanding, you're not putting expectations on people, and you're using right speech when you're interacting with people and not trying to convince them to do one thing or the other, but let them make their own choices.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I don't try and convince them. What happens here is when I bring my own container or bag, they sometimes they want to insist that I use the plastic bag. So they can't seem to understand that my fruits don't need to go in a plastic bag. So I end up having these interactions. But now I choose to go somewhere where they might be more receptive to it. Good. And then I try and relax when I'm having an interaction. So so thank you. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was the unwavering confidence. So what I feel is that I have confidence in what I'm learning, but like Samantha said, I wouldn't use unwavering confidence yet but I feel is that I don't have unwavering confidence in myself, in life. So it sounds like, would you say that I need to practice more? So more meditation, maybe some of these things with my interactions with people, practicing more loving kindness so that I can feel and have no doubt about what I'm reading, and I can see effects in my everyday life. But I would like to get to that place that you describe where I feel it, that solidness.
Yeah, learning the Eightfold Path inside and out and backwards and forwards, which I'm going to be teaching in the group learning program coming up in this month in June. That's what you really need to focus in on and hone in on, because while it sounds like you've been kind of dabbling on the path to enlightenment, you really need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards. And most people haven't learned it with the original words of the Buddha. Even if they have studied other places, they haven't necessarily studied the Eightfold Path based in his original words. And that's what's actually going to produce the benefit and results for you. So if you can't describe what you're experiencing now as unwavering confidence, that's okay. But you can get to that point by producing results in your mind. And the way you produce the results is by dialing in the Eightfold Path really closely.
Thank you, Teacher David. I will.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me check YouTube and Facebook and see if we have any questions there. Okay, I don't see any questions there. So let's go to the next one. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this one? This is chapter 32. Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Oh, I think three kind of wonders. There are three kind of wonders, Kevada, which I, having myself understood and realized them, have made known to others. And what are the three? 1, the mystic wonder. 2, the wonder of mind reading. And 3, the wonder of instruction. And what Kevadda is a mystic wonder. In this case, Kevadda, suppose that a brother enjoys the possession in various ways of mystic power. From being one, he knows multiform. From being multiform, he becomes one. From being visible, he becomes invisible. He passes without hindrance to the further side of a wall or a battlement or a mountain as if through air. He penetrates up and down through solid ground as if through water. He walks in water without dividing it, as if on solid ground. He travels cross-legged through the sky like the birds on wing. He touches and feels with the hand even the moon and the sun, beings of mystic power and potency though they be. He reaches even in the body up to the heavenly realm. And some believer of trusting heart should behold him doing so. Then that believer should announce the fact that to an unbeliever, saying, "Wonderful, sir, and marvelous is the mystic power and potency of that ascetic." Then that unbeliever should say to him, "Well, sir, there is a certain charm called the Gandhara charm. Gandhar charm. It is by his own ability that he performs all this." Now what think you, Kevadda? Might not the unbeliever so say? Yes, sir, he might. Well, Kevadda, it is because I perceive danger in the practice of mystic wonders that I disagree and refrain from, and I am reluctant to perform. And what, Kevadda, is the wonder of mind reading? Suppose in this case, Kevadda, that a brother can make known the heart and the feelings, the reasonings and the thoughts of other beings, of other individuals, saying, "So and so is in your mind. You are thinking of such and such a matter. Thus and thus are your emotions." And some believer of trusting heart should see him doing so. Then that believer should announce the fact to an unbeliever, saying, "Wonderful, sir, and marvelous is the mystic power and potency of that ascetic." Then that unbeliever should say to him, "Well, sir, there is a charm called the jewel charm. It is by his own ability that he performs all this." Now what think you, Kevadda? Might not the unbeliever so say? Yes, sir, he might. Well, Kevadda, it is because I perceive danger in the practice of the wonder of mind reading that I disagree and refrain from, and am reluctant to perform. And what, Kevadda, is the wonder of instruction? Suppose, Kevadda, that a brother teaches thus: reason is on the way. Do not reason in that way. Consider thus and not thus. Get rid of this disposition. Train yourself and remain in that. This, Kevadda, is what is called the wonder of instruction. And further, Kevadda, suppose that a Tathagata is born into the world, one who has won the truth, the Arahant, a fully awakened one, abounding in wisdom and goodness, joyful, who knows all words, unsurpassed as a guide to humans willing to be led, a teacher of gods and humans, perfectly enlightened one, a Buddha. He by himself thoroughly knows and sees, as it were, face to face this universe, including the worlds above of God, the gods, the Brahmas and the Maras, and the world below with the ascetics and the Brahmins, its princes and peoples. Having known it, he makes his wisdom known to others. The truth, lovely in its origin, lovely in its progress, lovely in its completion, does he proclaim, both in the spirit and in the letter. The higher life does he make known, in all its fullness and all its purity. A householder, or one of his children, or a man of inferior birth in any class listens to that truth. And on hearing it, he has confidence in the Tathagata, the one who has found the truth. And when he is possessed of that confidence, he considers thus within himself: full of hindrances in household life, a path for the dust of passion. Free as the air is the life of him who has renounced all worldly things. How difficult is it for the man who dwells home to live the higher life in all its fullness, in all its purity, in all its bright perfection. Let me then cut off my hair and beard. Let me clothe myself in the orange-colored robes. And let me go forth from the household life into the homeless life. Then, before long, renouncing his portion of wealth, be it great or small, leaving behind a circle of relatives, be they many or be they few, he cuts off by his hair and beard. He clothes himself in the orange-colored robes, and he goes forth from the household life into the homeless life. When he has thus become an ascetic, he lives self-restrained by that restraint, from what that should be binding on the ascetic. Uprightness is his delight, and he sees danger in the least of those things he should avoid. He adopts and trains himself in the precepts. He encompasses himself with wholesome deeds in actions and speech. Pure are his means of livelihood, wholesome is his conduct, guarded the door of his senses. Mindful and self-possessed, he is altogether joyful. And now, Kevadda, is his conduct wholesome? In this Kevadda, that the monk, putting away the killing of living beings, abandoning the destruction of life. The stick and the sword he has laid aside, and reluctant to roughness and full of mercy, he resides compassionate and kind to all creatures and that have life. Kevadda, this is called the wonder of instruction. With this mind is serene, made pure, translucent, cultured, free of evil, flexible, ready to act, firm and imperturbable, unable to be upset or excited, calm, serene. He directs and bends down his mind to the wisdom of the destruction of the deadly floods. He knows that really is. This is discontentedness. He knows that it really is. This is the cause of discontentedness. He knows that it really is. This is the elimination of discontentedness. He knows that it really is. This is the path that leads to the elimination of discontentedness. He knows that they really are. These are the deadly floods. He knows that this really is. This is the cause of the deadly floods. He knows that it really is. This is the elimination of the deadly floods. He knows that it really is. This is the path that leads to the elimination of the deadly floods. To him, thus knowing, thus seeing, the mind is set free from the deadly poison of craving, is set free from deadly poison of anger, is set free from the deadly poison of ignorance, unknowing of true reality. In him, thus set free, there arises the knowledge of his liberation, and he knows rebirth has been destroyed, holy life has been fulfilled. What had to be done has been accomplished. After this present life, there will be no beyond. Just Kevadda, as if in a mountain fastness there were a pool of water, clear, translucent, and serene, and a man standing on the bank and with eyes to see should perceive the oysters and the shells, the gravel and the pebbles and the shoals of fish as they move about or lie within it. He would know this pool is clear, transparent, and serene, and there within it are the oysters and the shells, and the sand and the gravel, and the shoals of fish are moving about or lying still. This Kevadda is what is called the wonder of instruction. So these Kevadda are the three kinds of wonders I have understood and realized myself and made known to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So I'm going to talk about this discourse from a high level because it's very detailed. And then anything you guys would like to drill into, just let me know. So essentially what the Buddha is talking about is essentially these three miracles. In some places, the word is translated as miracles instead of like wonder. And there's this mystic wonder or mystic miracle or this mind reading miracle, and then this miracle of instruction. And what the Buddha is saying is this mystic miracle or wonder is where an individual has these mystic powers to kind of like do these miracle type things. And the Buddha is saying that I don't actually do those things. Down here, he says he understands the danger in these things, that if you start performing all these different miracles, that people will just kind of, perceive that in certain ways. So a Buddha doesn't go around performing a bunch of miracles in order to convince people who they are. That's not the way that their teachings work. Their teachings are independently verifiable, so they don't need to go around and perform a bunch of miracles. They will typically perform one miracle at the very beginning of their teaching career, and they'll do that for a limited number of people just to help those individuals to know who they are. And that is kind of helping those people who are instrumental to bringing the teachings into the world to be able to know that this person is an actual Buddha. But beyond that, a Buddha doesn't perform any miracles. So the Buddha performed one miracle during his life. It was at the very beginning of his teaching career. So the Buddha is saying, I don't perform these types of miracles where you're doing all these mystical and magical things. Then he's talking about this mind reading where you can actually read someone else's mind, because once you are training your mind and you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment, you'll have these kind of experiences where you can know the thoughts and ideas of other people's minds. But going around and divulging that, the Buddha is saying that he sees the danger in that and he doesn't actually do it. Right? So this is something that he chooses not to do. Now, a Buddha does observe the quality of their students' minds and sees where the unwholesome qualities are, helping them to eliminate those, or at least know the teachings to eliminate those, and then also seeing the wholesome qualities and helping their students to understand what those are so they'll continue to practice them. So the Buddha doesn't perform these first two things that he's talking about. But then he talks about this other wonder or this other miracle, which is the wonder of instruction. And this is actually guiding someone on the path to enlightenment. And this is what the Buddha says he performs, is that he guides people on the path to enlightenment in this wonder of instruction. And he goes through all the detail of what that's like and what a Buddha actually does and how they kind of function. He talks about that here. And then he goes on further and explains more detail about this. He talks about how an individual who's sharing the teachings and this practicing this wonder of instruction will explain what is wholesome. And ultimately, he talks about how this individual understands and knows the Four Noble Truths. This is the very beginning of the path to enlightenment. And then also they understand the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots, or we also refer to them as the three fires that he's describing here. Right, so he's going through a lot of different details here. So I'm just going to kind of let you guys see if you have any questions. And if not, we'll just move on to the next chapter. But this one is where the Buddha is saying, hey, I don't perform those mystical, magical, miracle things. What I do is I share the teachings to help people train their mind and get to this enlightened mental state. And that's also, to the Buddha, considered somewhat of a wonder or somewhat of a miracle. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I mean, both the mystic wonder about like being able to go through like solid ground and air, walk on water and stuff. I mean, is this like independently verifiable? Like, there have been accounts in the Pali Canon, but are the other things like actually verifiable in the current like world?
There are depictions in the Pali Canon of people doing this, but I've never seen it for myself. So that's one of the reasons why I also don't go into detail on this, because I've never seen it for myself.
Okay. And the other question was on the deadly floods. Is that the first time we're seeing this description? Is that like the 5 precepts or?
No, this is just another way to describe the Four Noble Truths. So down here where he's talking about the deadly floods, so you can see he's using the same type of description as he is for the Four Noble Truths. He's saying he knows as it really is, these are the deadly floods. This is the cause, this is the elimination, and this is the path that leads to the elimination. The deadly floods are the mind being flooded with these poisons, so the individual understands what those are and how to eliminate them.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, Denise, you have a question? Just have to unmute yourself there. There you go.
Thank you, Teacher David. I'm curious about the context in which this teaching emerged. Would you mind sharing a bit, please?
I need to go back and actually look at the reference and see what was going on before this and after this, but I don't recall. These are the kind of things that what I focus on is I focus on what is the Buddha actually teaching here. And he's teaching he's not teaching to do all this flashy stuff. He's teaching to stay focused on sharing of the teachings. And, that's what's really important is this instruction, right? And making sure that people are receiving instruction. If I remember correctly, I remember that there was a monk who actually did one of these mystic wonders. And the Buddha said, hey guys, like you shouldn't be doing these things because this is actually going to dissuade people from actually getting what they really need, which is learning and practicing the teachings. Because if somebody saw you fly through the air, for example, and then that person went and told another person who wasn't present, they went and told another person like, oh my goodness, I saw these monks flying through the air and they're doing all this miraculous stuff. That other person that heard that, they're going to be like, man, get out of here with that stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Right? Because they didn't see it for themselves. And now that individual who's flown through the air, they might be doing this to boast and look great in front of other people. And what the Buddha is saying is this isn't the purpose of this path, is to impress people and show them all these mystical, magical things. And because that's going to propagate where people are not going to think that they're really serious about growing and learning to get to enlightenment, that they're too busy doing all these mystical and magical things. So the Buddha is saying, instead of doing all that stuff, focus on providing instruction and guidance so people can get the real benefit of the path to enlightenment.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll move to this next chapter, which is chapter 33. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, looks like Claire. Go ahead, ma'am. Just need to unmute you. There you go.
One who is near to Nibbana, enlightenment. Monks possessed of 4 qualities, a man is incapable of falling away. He is near to Nibbana, enlightenment. What are the 4? Herein, a monk is perfect in virtue, practicing moral conduct. He is guarded as to the doors of the sense bases. He is moderate in eating. He is devoted to watchfulness. And in what way is a monk perfect in virtue or moral conduct? Herein a monk is virtuous. He resides restrained with the restraint of the training guidelines, perfect in the practice of right moral conduct. He sees danger in the slightest faults. He takes up and trains himself in the stages of training. Thus a monk is perfect in virtue, moral conduct. And how is a monk guarded as to the doors of the sense bases? Herein, a monk, seeing a form with the eye, does not grasp at the general features or at the details. Since craving and aversion, evil, unprofitable states, might flow in upon one who resides with the sense base of the eye uncontrolled, he applies himself to such control. He sets a guard over the sense base of the eye, and he attains control. When he hears a sound with the ear, or with the nose smells an odor, or with the tongue tastes a flavor, or with the body touches a physical object. When the mind he recognizes a mental object, he does not grasp at the general features or details. But since craving and aversion, evil, unprofitable states, might flow in upon one who resides with the sense base of the eye uncontrolled, he applies himself to such control. He sets a guard over the sense base of the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, and attains control. That is how a monk has the doors of the sense bases guarded. And how is a monk moderate in eating? Herein a monk takes his food thoughtfully and carefully, not for sport, not for indulgence, not for personal charm or adornment, but just enough for the support, for the continuance of the body, for its resting unharmed, to help the living of the holy life. With this thought, my former feeling I check, and I set going no new feeling. Thus maintenances shall be mine, blamelessness and comfort in life. Thus a monk is moderate in eating. And how is a monk devoted to watchfulness? By day, a monk walks up and down and then sits. Thus purify the mind of obstructive states. By night, for the first watch, he does likewise. In the middle watch of the night, lying on his right side, he takes up the lion posture, resting one foot on the other, and thus collected and composed fixes his thoughts on rising up again. In the last watch of the night, at early dawn, he walks up and down, then sits, and so purifies the mind of obstructive states. That is how a monk is devoted to watchfulness. Possessed of these four qualities, a monk is incapable of falling away. He is near to Nibbana, enlightenment.
Okay, thank you, Claire. So again, this is a teaching that it's important not to look at in isolation, that in order to get close to enlightenment, there's multiple things that you would need to learn and understand. But these are four aspects of your practice that would be well developed as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment. So the first one, the Buddha is talking about this moral conduct, because even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to have improved moral conduct, because as you're putting out harm into the world through your moral conduct, that harm is going to keep coming back to you. So how can you get to this peaceful and joyful mental state and this peaceful and joyful life if you keep experiencing all this harm coming back to you? So by you shutting down your unwise and unwholesome moral conduct, it will drastically improve what you're experiencing coming back to you. So even to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would be practicing the wholesome moral conduct. Guarding the doors of the sense spaces, this is what we were talking about in the previous book before this, in volume 9, that the doorways to discontentedness are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. Anytime you experience discontentedness, there's going to be contact through these doorways. That if you see a physical form that is agreeable to you, you will experience pleasant feelings based on that condition. But if you see and have contact with a physical form that you see as disagreeable, then you will experience painful feelings. And the same thing is happening through the ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. So you're going to need to guard these doorways, and having understood sensual desire, where the mind is longing, yearning through these 6 sense spaces, craving permanently agreeable contact, you will understand that you need to be able to restrain the mind and not allow the mind to go unrestrained and allow the mind's craving to form inner feelings based on these things. So you're going to need to learn how to eliminate your sensual desire. And this is a core central aspect of the path where you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, wants, and expectations. Then this moderation in eating is also along the same lines as sensual desire, because one of the things that happens is when the mind ends up in painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, or others, if the mind is unwise and it doesn't understand why it's ended up there, because the reason why it's ended up there is because of its cravings, desires, attachments not getting fulfilled. And now when the mind's in the painful feelings, the untrained mind, it wants to get back to something that's somewhat comfortable. And the only way it knows how to do that is through craving. So this is why somebody can have a hard day at work and come home and turn to alcohol or drugs or sex or gambling or shopping or sometimes food. People will turn to food in order to get to pleasant feelings, but those are conditional pleasant feelings. And if you understand that your mind has ended up in the painful feelings because of its cravings, then you understand the last thing you're interested in doing is craving something else to get the mind into the pleasant feelings again, because those conditioned pleasant feelings are going to fade away as soon as that craving is no longer getting fulfilled. So if you're going to break this cycle of craving something, getting pleasant feelings, but then when you don't have those cravings fulfilled, you end up in the painful feelings, you won't crave something else to go back to the pleasant feelings. Instead, you'll get rid of that craving. Whatever that craving is that ended up in the painful feelings, why your mind is in that painful feeling, you'll figure out what is this craving that's leading to this painful feeling, and let me eliminate that. That's what's going to take care of these painful feelings. Craving something like food and turning to a big tub of ice cream or eating an entire chocolate cake or something like this, that's not going to fix the mind. It's just keeping the problem going. So the Buddha taught to eat just one time a day, but you don't have to eat just one time a day to get to enlightenment. What you need to actually do is eat in moderation, where you're not gorging and you're not eating based on emotions. That if you notice that your mind's turning towards food based on emotions that you're having, you're going to need to restrain the mind. And that's part of guarding the sense bases and eating in moderation. And then this fourth one that an individual who's close to enlightenment would be practicing is this devoted to watchfulness. This is where you're looking over the mind at all times during your day, from when you're first starting to wake up to all day long to as you're going to sleep at night. Your thoughts can invade you at any time, and you would like to watch over the mind and take action to be able to cut off and let go, applying right effort. So if you're just waking up in the morning and you're like, oh, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to see those people, I don't want to talk to my boss, you got to be able to train your mind not to think that way. You need to cut off and let go and not allow your thoughts to invade you. Or if you're going to sleep at night and you're feeling guilty about some of the things that you did during the day, you need to watch over the mind and cut that off and let it go. Or if you're noticing anger or frustration. So the Buddha is giving you some details about at different times during the day or night when you're actually watching over the mind. But essentially what he's saying is this path to enlightenment is a full-time job. That from morning all day long and as you're going to sleep, you need to watch over the mind with your mindfulness or awareness of mind. And if at any point you see unwholesome qualities, you'd like to apply right effort and cut that off and eliminate it. And where you see wholesome qualities, you would like to support those, encourage those, and don't allow them to fade, bring them to full growth and full perfection. So these are 4 aspects of practice that an individual who's close to enlightenment would be practicing. They'd be practicing their moral conduct perfectly. They'd be guarding the doors of the sense spaces. They haven't eliminated sensual desire yet, but they're guarding the doorways, and they know that any kind of contact can trigger a craving. So they're watching over the mind with its moderation of eating and being devoted to watchfulness of the mind. So do you guys have any questions here on this chapter? Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll go to this next one, which is chapter 34. And it looks like Samantha maybe would like to read that one. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. The supreme development of the sense bases. Now, Ananda, How is there the supreme development of the sense bases in the Noble One's discipline? Here, Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, there arises in him what is agreeable, there arises what is disagreeable, there arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. He understands thus: there has arisen in me what is agreeable, there has arisen what is disagreeable, there has arisen what is both agreeable and disagreeable. But that is conditioned, clear, dependently arisen. This is peaceful, this is superb, that is equanimity. The agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose are eliminated in him, and equanimity is established. Just as a man with good sight, having opened his eyes, might shut them, or having shut his eyes, might open them, so too concerning anything at all, the agreeable that arose, the disagreeable that arose, and the both agreeable and disagreeable that arose are eliminated just as quickly, just as rapidly, just as easily, and equanimity is established. This is called, in the Noble One's discipline, the supreme development of the sense bases regarding form recognizable by the eye. Similar discourses were spoken in the case of hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a physical object with the body, recognizing a mental object with the mind, though with different analogy, as the following. Sound, just as a strong man might easily snap his fingers. Odor, just as raindrops on a slightly sloping lotus leaf roll off. Flavor, just as a strong man might easily spit out a ball of spit collected on the tip of the tongue. Physical object, just as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm. Mental object, just as if a man were to let 2 or 3 drops of water fall onto an iron plate heated for a whole day, they would quickly vaporize and vanish.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha teaches here, and he teaches in his other discourses, where he talks about this agreeable and disagreeable contact that you experience through the sense bases. He also sometimes calls it favoring and opposing. This is what the mind does when it has craving, desire, attachment. When it has sensual desire, whenever there's contact, the mind will see it as either agreeable or disagreeable. And that's where you'll get pleasant feelings if it's agreeable and painful feelings if it's disagreeable. And the same thing with favoring and opposing. But by the time you get your mind more well-trained, you don't see it as agreeable or disagreeable. It's just contact. So that music that you hear in the person's car next to you, you might prefer that particular music. It's like, wow, there's some music. All right, let's dance. Let's have a good time. But when this other music comes up that you don't typically listen to, you're not affected by it. You don't see it as disagreeable. It's just a different type of music. It's just impermanence. That's all it is. But when you have craving in your mind, you're going to see it as agreeable or disagreeable. And you're going to have favoring and opposing. And that's where you're going to form conditioned feelings. So ultimately, you would like to train your mind so well that you don't have agreeable and disagreeable contact, that it's just contact coming in through the ears. So you might see it when someone's polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to you, that is agreeable to you. And now maybe you get pleasant feelings. But then when somebody's impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, now maybe you get painful feelings. Or you need to be able to see that as just sound. It's just sound that's entering the ear. They're not talking about this being who you are, because there is no being here. And if they have certain perceptions or they have certain unwise moral conduct, that's on them and that's their decision. You don't have to form any feelings, because there's going to be some people in the world that are polite, kind, friendly, respectful, and some people aren't. That's just impermanence. But if your mind's craving permanently agreeable contact and having people be polite, kind, friendly, respectful for you or with you, you will get this discontent feelings when they're polite, kind, friendly, respectful. You're going to get pleasant feelings. But when they're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, you're going to get those painful feelings. So rather than seeing things as agreeable and disagreeable and favoring and opposing things, instead, just see it as contact through these sense bases. And that's ultimately what you need to be able to get to. And the Buddha's kind of guiding you here, but he also talks about it in more detail in other places as well. So do you guys have questions here on the sense bases and getting to a point where you don't see things as agreeable or disagreeable, but it's just contact coming through the sense bases. And then you can reside peaceful and joyful without having that agreeable and disagreeable. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now let's go to the next one, which is chapter 35. There's someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Leo.
Yeah, thank you. Need not to know how much feathers were worn away. Monks, just as a carpenter or a carpenter's apprentice, inspecting the handle of his sees Therion, the marks of his fingers and thumbs, nor knows how much of the ace handle was worn away that day, nor the previous day, nor at any time, yet knows just when the wearing away has reached the end of wearing away. Even so, monks, a monk intent upon making, become known not to what extent the feathers were worn away that day, nor the previous day, nor at any time, yet knows just when the wearing away has reached the end of wearing away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So for those of you guys that have heard me teach loving kindness meditation, I usually talk about this particular discourse, that when you're wearing away these fetters like ill will or sensual desire or conceit or some of these others, they're very deeply rooted. Every single one of these fetters are deeply rooted in the mind. And it's going to take multiple years to wear away the actual fetter, the pollution of the mind. And what the Buddha is saying is each day, you're not going to know how much of that fetter you're wearing away, but when it's completely gone, you're going to know that. So if you've been angry and hostile and bitter in certain relationships that you were in, and I usually give the example of how I had that growing up with my mom, if you start training your mind with loving kindness meditation or any of these other teachings that the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate these fetters, each day you're wearing away the pollution of mind, but you're not going to know how much. But when it's completely gone, you're going to know that. When it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, you're not angry or frustrated with your mom or with other people, you'll know that this fetter has been worn away. And he's giving this great analogy of a digging tool, that if you have this wooden handle, each day you're wearing away the wood, but you don't know how much of the wood you're wearing away. But when this handle is completely exhausted and you need to replace it, then you're going to know that, right? So it's the same thing with all of these fetters. And that's where, since we were just talking about the confidence in the Buddha, the teachings in the community, that's where that comes in. Because each day you're not going to know how much of the fetter or pollution that you're wearing away. But if you can get that confidence, that unwavering confidence that you know there's progress, and you haven't necessarily verified all the teachings, but you know there's progress and these teachings are legit, so to speak, right? Then you can get to a point where that confidence turns into diligence and dedication and determination, and you will see this through. Because getting to enlightenment isn't a 1 week thing, a 1 month thing, or even a 1 year thing. It's a multiple year journey. So you're going to need that confidence. You're going to need that determination and diligence to be able to see you through. So the Buddha is helping you to understand, like, hey, if you're learning and practicing these teachings, you are wearing away these pollutions, but you're not going to know how much each day. So as he shares in other teachings, stay dedicated, stay determined, stay diligent, have confidence that you're headed in the right direction. And that's what's going to see you through. So do you guys have any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to this next one, which is chapter 36. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, looks like Yihang. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. The Tathagata is the one who shows the way. The Brahminganaka Moggalliyana asked the perfectly enlightened one, when Master Gotama's disciples are thus advised and instructed by him, do they all attain Nibbana, the ultimate goal, or do some not attain it? When Brahmin, they are thus advised and instructed by me, some of my disciples attain Nibbana, the ultimate goal, and some do not attain it. Master Gotama, since Nibbana exists and the path leading to Nibbana exists, and Master Gotama's is present as the guide, What is the cause and reason why, when Master Gautama's disciples are thus advised and instructed by him, some of them attain Nibbana, the ultimate goal, and some do not attain it? As to that, Brahmin, I will ask you a question in return. Answer it as you choose. What do you think, Brahmin? Are you familiar with the road leading to Rajagaha? Yes, Master Gautama, I am familiar with the road leading to Rajagaha. What do you think, Brahmin? Suppose a man came who wanted to go to Rajagaha, and he approached you and said, Venerable Sir, I want to go to Rajagaha. Show me the road to Rajagaha. Then you told him, Now, good man, this road goes to Rajagaha. Follow it for a while, and you will see a certain village. Go a little further, and you will see a certain town. Go a little further, and you will see Rajagaha with its lovely parks, groves, meadows, and ponds. Then, having been thus advised and instructed by you, he would take a wrong road and would go to the west. Then a second man came who wanted to go to Rajagaha, and he approached you and said, Venerable Sir, I want to go to Rajagaha. Then you told him, Now, good man, this road goes to Rajagaha. Follow it for a while, and you will see a certain village. Go to a little further, and you will see a certain town. Go a little further, and you will see Rajagaha with its lovely parks, groves, meadows, and ponds. Then, having been thus advised and instructed by you, he would arrive safely in Rajagaha. Now, Brahmin, since Rajagaha exists, and the path leading to Rajagaha exists, and you are present as the guide, what is the cause and reason why, when those men have been thus advised and instructed by you, one man takes a wrong road and goes to the west, and one arrives safely in Rajagaha? What can I do about that, Master Gautama? I am one who shows the way. So too, Brahmin, Nibbana exists, and the path leading to Nibbana exists, and I am present as the guide. Yet when my disciples have been thus advised and instructed by me, some of them attain Nibbana, the ultimate goal, and some do not attain it. What can I do about that, Brahmin? The Tathagata is the one who shows the way. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So this is where you can see the Buddha's master diplomacy and ability to teach others. That here's an individual that's kind of questioning the Buddha and like, hey, do all your students get to enlightenment? And he's like, no, some get to enlightenment and some don't. And he's like, well, why is that? Why do some get to enlightenment and some don't? I mean, you're the Buddha, right? You're like this master of the path to enlightenment. Why is that? And the Buddha, rather than just telling it to him, he uses questioning to be able to allow this person to teach themselves. He's like, hey, you describe this one direction to one person of how to get to a certain town, and they take a wrong turn, and the other person is going to this town, and they actually arrive to the town. Why is it? You gave the same directions to both people. Why is it that one person gets there and one person doesn't? And he's like, oh, I'm just showing the way, right? Because it's up to the decisions of the traveler to determine whether they actually get to the town or not. Well, the Buddha says it's the same thing with me, that I'm just pointing the way. I'm just showing the way, and it's up to the individual people to decide whether they're going to actually accomplish that goal or not, and actually progress based on the advice and guidance that the Buddha is sharing. So this is like a masterful way to actually teach someone, is to ask them questions. You can actually do this with your children, with your life partner, with your employees, even with your boss when they're trying to ask certain things of you. You can become a real master at this, where you guide people to a certain answer and allow them to teach themselves. Because when you just tell somebody something, in some cases they need to go based on belief or trust or confidence in you as a person, and they may or may not have that. But if you can ask them well-developed questions very skillfully, and they actually lead themselves to the answer, they will then understand what it is that they're needing to learn, because they've essentially taught themselves. And that's what the Buddha was a real master at, is doing that kind of thing. And you can see a real display of that here. So do you guys have any questions on this particular chapter? This is chapter 36. The Tathagata is the one who shows the way. Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go to chapter 37. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Yihang and Leo both volunteered, but we'll take you guys in order.
Thank you, Teacher David. Cause and reason why some beings do not attain Nibbana in this very life. Venerable Sir, what is the cause and reason why some beings here do not attain Nibbana in this very life? There are ruler of the heavenly beings, forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting, if a monk seeks excitement in them, welcomes them, and remains holding to them, his consciousness becomes dependent upon them and clings to them. A monk with cling does not attain Nibbana. In the case of sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind. The discourses are similar to that of forms recognizable by the eye. This is the cause and reason, ruler of the heavenly beings, why some beings here do not attain Nibbana in this very life. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So the Buddha was documented as having taught heavenly beings during his life, not only human beings, but heavenly beings. These are the two types of beings in those realms that can actually get to enlightenment. There's documentation in the Pali Canon where the sky lit up and heavenly beings came and asked him questions. So here he's actually teaching a heavenly being, and this individual is asking somewhat of a similar question as before, but this one is a bit more specific. And this being is curious of why some beings don't attain enlightenment. And what the Buddha is saying is that it's because of sensual desire, that the beings are clinging to objects through their eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. Like, let's just say, I don't know, say you drink a glass of wine every day, and you're learning this path, and you're just unwilling to give up that wine because the mind's attached to it, that you get happy when you have it and you're sad when you don't have it. And if your mind's clinging to that central desire through the tongue and you're unwilling to give that up, then the individual's mind is still clinging, it's still craving. It can only be happy when it has this wine, and when it doesn't have it, it's angry or frustrated. So therefore the mind's not experiencing enlightenment. So any kind of clinging in the mind, it's going to produce discontent feelings. So therefore the individual's not going to get to enlightenment, because the individual gets all this excitement where they're seeking excitement or pleasant feelings. And they're trying to get that through conditional experiences of contact through the sense bases. And they welcome this contact. They remain holding on to it. And their mind becomes dependent upon it because now they're clinging to this particular thing. Something just happened yesterday, actually. I asked my son, I said, hey, are you going to go to football practice tomorrow, meaning today? And he's like, well, I'm going to talk to my friend. And if he goes, I'm going to go. And if he doesn't go, I won't go. And I said, that's an attachment right there. I said, why don't you just make a decision independently? That why do you have to make your decision of whether to go to football or not dependent on what somebody else does? You need to make a wise decision for yourself. Do you need exercise? Would you like to interact with your teammates? Do you need some help on your football skills and things like this? I suggest you make a decision independently of whether your friend goes or not, right? Because the mind can become dependent on this. And I'm only wanting to do this thing if somebody else does it too. So the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate that clinging and craving all throughout his teachings. And now he's saying this is the reason why people don't get to enlightenment. And there's other reasons too, but this is the reason that he's giving here, because oftentimes sensual desire is so deeply rooted, the mind doesn't want to let go. And this is a hindrance from the mind being able to experience enlightenment. So let me know if you guys have questions here. It looks like Samantha has something. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. The heavenly beings referred to here, are they beings in the heavenly realm?
Yes, and it's important to keep in mind that those heavenly beings aren't like in some far distant land somewhere. They're all in the same time and space as us. They're just a formless being, and some people can see them and some people can't.
Okay, that was my question, in that I knew that they were formless beings. So if they're formless, how can they have an ear and a nose and a tongue and things, the sense bases?
They still have their mind and they still have contact. I don't know about the 6 sense bases. I don't think they have all of those 6 sense bases, but I know that heavenly beings exist. I've had communication with them, but whether they are experiencing any type of contact through the sense bases, I don't have that level of insight to know for myself.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But they must have some level of, what I'll add here, Samantha, is they must have some level of interaction with the world, because they experience exclusively pleasant feelings. So they're getting something met. They're getting some condition met to be able to have those conditioned pleasant feelings. But I don't know that it's through eyes or ears or nose or tongue or those kinds of things.
They may not have all of the sense bases, but perhaps the mind. But not necessarily the tongue and the ear. Yeah,
they definitely have the mind, so they're getting contact through that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Denise might have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thanks, Teacher David. You're right to say might have a question, because it's not exactly a question, it's something that's on my mind. I'm trying to get the screen. So I'm just curious about how you feel about people, like groups of Buddhists that have been around, in which people quite regularly say, I don't think I'll get to enlightenment in this lifetime. I've never really been comfortable about it, but never confident enough to say deep down, I would like to. Then when I read a part of your book in which you encourage that openness about it, it was very empowering for me. And I'm just sitting here wondering, like you told your son, what would you tell me about being around such groups? Should I be wary? I mean, it's not really a question, it's a concern on my mind.
Yeah, different people are going to have different thoughts on the path to enlightenment. Okay. And if somebody else is thinking like, oh, I don't think I can get to enlightenment in this life, that's their choice and that's where they're coming from. But you don't have to adopt that same thinking. It would be unwise to conform to what other people are thinking. Instead, you can just understand that they're lacking confidence, right? They don't have that confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And oftentimes it's because people aren't actually learning the original teachings of the Buddha, that they lack confidence in their ability to get to enlightenment. But if you're learning the true teachings, which you are, because these teachings will absolutely lead to enlightenment, I can assure you of that, but you need to be able to see it for yourself, that there's no harm in you maintaining the view of, my goal in this life is to get to enlightenment, and I'm going to work towards that gradually. What other people choose to do, that's up to them. And that doesn't mean that you have to be weary of them or judge them for where they are in their practice. That's just where they are in their practice. And you can just know that that's where they are, but you're in a different mindset than that. And your goal is to get to enlightenment.
Thank you very much. Because thank you. Yeah. Before I joined your classes, the only person I ever said these things to was my husband. Like, I really feel like I would like to. So thank you.
That's a pretty common view. People will say that, their ultimate goal is to get to the first stage of enlightenment, or they're not going to get to enlightenment in this life. This just allows the mind to be complacent, because it's not willing to read and come to classes and interact with a teacher and do meditation. It allows the mind to be complacent in a very big way, and the mind's making an excuse for that, and it's unwise to do that. So that's why I encourage students to focus on enlightenment, because it's the whole adage, right, where people say, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, at least you'll be among the stars. Right? It's the same thing. Shoot for enlightenment. And if you miss, you know what? Maybe you'll be in the third stage or the second stage or the first stage. But if you shoot for the first stage, that means that you're going to fall really short of that. Or if you're not even shooting for enlightenment at all, and you're just like, whatever happens, happens, right? Like, this isn't any way to guide your life. So if you are interested in having a career, or maybe a car, or a certain house, or something like that, set your goal on that thing, but then just don't attach your emotions to it, and just keep working towards that thing with wise decision making. So I suggest people to set their sights on enlightenment, and then there's no reason why they can't get to enlightenment in this life. But if they fall short, hey, they're in the third stage of enlightenment or the second stage, which is quite wonderful for them. So, that's wonderful that they've done that. But if you set your sights shorter than that or lower than that, it's really a dangerous type of thinking to adopt in the mind.
I agree. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so Leo, would you like to read this one? You had raised your hand on the last one.
Yeah, thank you. No desire for the nutriment once attains enlightenment. If, monks, there is no desire for the nutriment edible food, or for the nutriment contact, or for the nutriment of volitional formations, or for the nutriment consciousness, if there is no excitement, if there is no craving, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, there is no development of name and form. Where there is no development of name and form, there is no growth of volitional formations. Where there is no growth of volitional formations, there is no production of future renewed existence. Where there is no production of future renewed existence, there is no future birth, aging, and death. Where there is no future birth, aging, and death, I say that, is without sorrow, anguish, and despair. Suppose, monks, there was a house, a hall with a peaked roof, with windows on the northern, southern, and eastern side. When the sun rises and a beam of light enters through a window, where would it become established? On the western wall, Venerable Sir. If there were no western wall, where would it be established? On the earth, Venerable Sir. If there were no earth, where would it be established? On the water, Venerable Sir. If there were no water, where would it be established? It would not become established anywhere, Venerable Sir. So too, monks, if there is no desire for the nutriment edible food, for the nutriment contact, for the nutriment of volitional formations, for the nutriment consciousness, consciousness does not become established there and come to growth. Where consciousness does not become established and come to growth, there is no development of name and form. Where there is no development of name and form, there is no growth of volitional formations. Where there is no growth of volitional formations, there is no production of future renewed existence. Where there is no production of future renewed existence, there is no future birth, aging, and death. Where there is no future birth, aging, and death, I say that, is without sorrow, grief, and despair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So with the Buddha teaching about how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, which is the cause of discontentedness, this is also the cause of rebirth as well. So by getting to enlightenment, eliminating craving, desire, attachment, you've also eliminated coming back into the world and experiencing sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure all over again. So the Buddha is saying that if there's no birth, then there is no aging, death, sorrow, anguish, or despair. So he's helping you to be able to see in this discourse and others what is leading to this constant rebirth and what's leading to this constant discontentedness. And it's dependent origination and other teachings that you can use to independently verify these things. But here he's just saying, hey, this nutriment, meaning this source of continuation, is this nutriment of edible food. Like just like food nourishes this body and sustains this body, that when you're having contact, when there's these desires for edible food, when there's desire for contact, when there's desire for certain volitional formations and choices and decisions, and the consciousness itself, then the mind keeps holding on. That if the mind's chasing and craving and longing and yearning, then it's going to continue to have the causes and conditions that leads to the very next rebirth. And you can gather this more accurately in some of the other teachings. This is where the totality of the teachings comes into play, where this one, he's kind of talking about this nutriment, which is like this source of what's causing a particular thing to occur. Where in other discourses, he says it very clearly, where he says, craving is the fuel that leads to rebirth. That as long as there's craving in the mind at the time of death, there's going to be rebirth. So that's ultimately why you're working to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, is to get rid of the discontentedness, but also to get rid of this continuous rebirth. And then the Buddha gives an analogy on this about a particular house that has sun coming through the windows, that if the wall wasn't there, if the earth wasn't there, if the water wasn't there, that there would be nowhere for this sun to be established. And it's the same thing, that if there's no desire, if there's no craving, if there's no longing, yearning, there's no clinging and holding on to this world, then there's no way for the mind to become established into a new life. And that's what he's helping you to be able to see through this analogy. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. This is kind of prepping you to be able to explore dependent origination in the next chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we're going into chapter 39 and 40, which is dependent origination. So now, Keely, this is the first part of dependent origination here.
Okay, thank you. Dependent origination, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that ceases.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, ma'am. So this is like a little bit of a prep to be able to understand the detailed version of dependent origination, that you need to be able to see this, the Buddha calls it principle of entailment, where when there's one thing that exists, then something else comes to be. And when this thing arises, that thing comes to be. But then also when this thing doesn't exist, then that thing doesn't come to be. And with the elimination of this, this thing ceases. Right? So let's just take something simple before we get into dependent origination. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises, right? So by choosing to go to school and learn English, you're able to apply for a job. Because you learn English, being able to apply for a job comes to be. By applying for a job, you get a job interview. By getting a job interview, you actually interview for the job. By interviewing for the job, you get a job offer. By getting a job offer, you get a job. By getting a job, you get a paycheck. By getting a paycheck, you're able to purchase clothing. By being able to purchase clothing, you're able to go out into the world, meet friends, and have people to talk to and conversate with. All of this is happening because of the very first cause and condition, which is the choice to learn English, right? For example, or any language, really. Right? All this sequence of events is like a cascading effect. It's like a dominoes, that one thing is leading to the next, it's leading to the next, that's leading to the next. Without learning English, you wouldn't have been able to do all those intermediary steps to be able to get to the point where you're able to have friends and conversate with other people. But then conversely, if this does not exist, then that does not come to be. If you do not learn English, right, you cannot apply for a job. If you do not apply for a job, you will not get a job interview. By not getting a job interview, you will not get a job. By not getting a job, you will not get a paycheck. By not getting a paycheck, you will not be able to buy clothes, and therefore you won't be able to go outside and interact with other people and have conversations with them. So because an individual chose not to learn English, they can't conversate with a particular individual, right? Or any language at all, right? So the Buddha is showing you this is called a principle of entailment, where one thing leads to another, that leads to another, that leads to another. And this is very important as we get to dependent origination. So I don't think you guys have questions here, but if you do, let me know. Okay, looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I would just like to read the next chapter.
Oh, okay, sure. All right, so now we go to dependent origination, which is considered the highest law of nature, where now you're going to be able to see the most detailed level of teaching, where the Buddha is showing this cause and effect, how one thing leads to the other that leads to another. And you can independently verify this here. So go ahead, Vibhav. If you can just read this first part, we're not going to read all the other subsequent parts.
Okay. Dependent origination of the law of nature. Monks, with ignorance and knowing of true reality as condition, volitional formations, choices, decisions come to be. With volition formation as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the six sense bases. The six sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be, such as the cause of the whole mass of discontentedness.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So the rest of this is just describing what each one of these factors are. This is where you need to be able to understand what each individual thing is. Okay, so what the Buddha is teaching you here is essentially a recipe and showing you how you get to discontentedness, how you get to continued rebirth, how you get to discontentedness. How do you keep coming back into this world over and over and over and over again? Where in the Four Noble Truths and all of his other teachings, he's kind of penetrating into it with like a little window and kind of giving it to you in a simple teaching. But then as you develop your practice more and more and you develop your understanding what all these things are, then you can penetrate into it more deeply and see this cause and effect relationship, this cascading of events. That when there's ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, where the mind lacks wisdom, it has confusion and misunderstanding, there's certain choices and decisions that the mind makes. And those choices and decisions are going to be based in this ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. And because of that, it's going to produce certain results. When your mind's making certain free will decisions with your volitional formations, that they're based in this unknowing of true reality, that is then going to produce the conditions that lead to a new consciousness. And now when there's that new consciousness, that consciousness needs to find what's called a name and form. For all intents and purposes, you can consider this to be the physical body. The Buddha talks about it down in the detail, what is name and form, but you can basically essentially know that this is the mind or the physical body. Here, I'll show it to you. That here, he says what name and form is it's the feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, I'll skip over this one for a second, in consciousness. Right? So these are 4 of the 5 aggregates: feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. Then down here, he talks about how what form is the 4 great elements. Whenever he's talking about the physical body, they describe the physical body as the 4 great elements, meaning earth, water, wind, and fire. This is how they describe the body, where today we talk about it as cells and molecules and bones and atoms and things like this, because we have a much deeper level of understanding, where during his lifetime they would refer to it as the 4 great elements. And that's what the physical form is. So these 4 aggregates of feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness, along with form, this is called the 5 aggregates or the 5 criteria. These are the 5 things that make a living being a living being. Every living being is going to have these 5 things: form, feeling, perceptions, volitional formations, and consciousness. Then also the Buddha is saying what name and form is this contact. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, I suggest you just think of this one as the physical body whenever you're looking at dependent origination. Okay, so now when you're studying dependent origination and you understand that consciousness, that mind that has been created in the world, it needs to find a physical body in the mother's womb, right? So the consciousness is coming into the womb of the mother. And now when the name and form, the physical body and the consciousness are together, there's these 6 sense bases that get formed. That's the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and then of course the mind itself is already there. There's research that shows that this happens between 2 to 6 weeks of development of the fetus inside the womb. That's when these 6 sense bases are being created and developed and starting to mature inside the womb. Then once there's the 6 sense bases, there's now contact through those 6 sense bases. Even inside the womb, you're experiencing contact through the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. You're having this contact. Now that individual is going to experience certain feelings. They're going to experience pleasant feelings typically inside the womb. It's like, wow, I got this whole place to myself. You know, I got this food being pumped in on the umbilical cord. There's nobody else around. It's nice and soft and cushy and warm. Wow, this is pretty nice in here, right? I really like these pleasant feelings that I'm experiencing in here, right? And that's where then the craving, it becomes established, where the mind's longing, yearning, and craving. And then there's this clinging, where the mind's holding on, right? And then there's an existence, where this being is now in existence. It's inside the womb, but it's in existence. But then eventually, over time, as this as this fetus matures, this individual becomes more and more viable. Eventually, it is born into the world, right? Either through the birthing canal or nowadays through surgery. When this being is born and there's birth, there's going to be aging and death. This body is going to slowly age and it's going to lead to death. Because this being arose, it's going to change, which is the aging, and then it's going to die, right? Every single one of us are going to do that. We have to die. There's no ways in if, ands, or buts about that. Every single one of us are impermanent. And then in this whole process, this is where sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. So the way you can look at this is kind of like an equation that because of ignorance, that is leading to craving, desire, attachment. And then that is what leads to this discontentedness. This whole mass of discontentedness is essentially coming from the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. And that's why you never believe anything on the path to enlightenment. Because in order to dismantle this and get to the point where you're no longer experiencing discontentedness, you have to stop this first thing, right? Because if this exists, that comes to be. If that exists, then this will come to be, right? All these things are like dominoes. But if you can eliminate this, then this is eliminated, right? If you can eliminate the ignorance, then the grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated, right? So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're cultivating wisdom. That's the whole goal of the path to enlightenment, where you know the truth. Because as long as the mind has confusion or this unknowing of true reality, it can't eliminate its craving and clinging to be able to eliminate its discontentedness. So it's ignorance that is leading to craving, which is then leading to the anger, the sorrow, the resentment, the stress, the anxiety. So in order to dismantle this, you need to cultivate wisdom. And this is where you can see and understand why the Buddha never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Because there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship that's going to lead to wisdom in your mind, right? There's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you. There's no amount of strings that I can tie on your wrist that is going to help you eliminate ignorance. In fact, that is part of the ignorance, that the mind thinks that these things are actually going to somehow be beneficial. So by eliminating that ignorance and cultivating wisdom, now your decisions will be based in the wisdom. And that's not going to then continue to perpetrate and perpetuate this continuous cycle over and over and over again. Now, there's a diagram that I recently published in our Facebook group that helps you to be able to see this. And unfortunately here it's sideways, so you can't see it. But if you go to the book and you look in either this volume, which is volume 10, chapter 40, or if you look at volume 5, chapter 14, you'll be able to look at this diagram and turn it, and you can see how one thing leads to another. And there's been descriptive words put in here to help you understand how all of this leads from one thing to the next. And this was taken from the words of the Buddha and the way that I teach this, and this kind of table here, where it's showing that in your past life, you had ignorance and you had volitional formation, certain choices and decisions. We chose not to get to enlightenment. Now, maybe we never even knew the teachings in our previous lives, but one way or another, we chose not to get to enlightenment. So that lack of wisdom in those volitional formations led to what we're currently experiencing, which is a consciousness, a physical body, the 6 sense bases, there's contact coming through that, and then your mind experiences feelings as a result. And now, in the current present life, if you allow the mind to continue to crave and cling, there's going to be continued existence. And now in the future, you're going to experience birth, aging, and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is going to just keep happening over and over. So while we can separate it like this as past causes, present effects, present causes, and then future effects, we can look at it that way, and that's what the diagram shows. But we can also look at it in our current life that we have all 12 of these if you haven't gotten to enlightenment. Once you get to enlightenment, your mind no longer has ignorance, so you've dismantled all of this and you're not experiencing discontentedness any longer. But we can separate it and look at it from these two different angles. So let me know what questions you guys have here on dependent origination. This is a teaching that takes time to really sit with it, independently verify each individual aspect. And this is what will help you to verify the cycle of rebirth. It'll help you to understand the detail of why your mind is experiencing discontentedness over and over and over again. It will help you to understand your goal on this path is to cultivate wisdom and eliminate craving and clinging, because that's what's going to eliminate the discontentedness. So it looks like Samantha and some other people have questions. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Teacher David. I just wanted some clarification. This is the first time I've heard you say anything about the 6 sense bases in a fetus. So say before the 2 to 6 weeks or before the sense bases are fully formed, that being would not have the 5 aggregates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So as far as abortion, you would not be harming or killing a living being?
If you're terminating the pregnancy
at that stage?
Yeah, if you're terminating the pregnancy prior to the 6 sense bases, there can't be any feelings if there's no 6 sense bases. So at that point, it's not a living being based on dependent origination and everything that we know about the development of a fetus.
Okay, thank you.
But also I'll add to that is most people don't even know they're pregnant by that time, right? Like
true. No, very true. Yes, unless they're looking for it every day. Yeah. They're unlikely to know that early.
Yeah. So most of the time, at the time that you know that you're carrying a baby, it's already a living being.
You're past that. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. About the fetus. I just had a discussion with my sister some weeks ago, and I think she disagreed with me that it's so early. And I think we looked at the internet, and that the internet also showed a different, something different here. So, I don't know. It's just what came up right now. I don't remember what actually the internet said. I think something from the 9th week or something, that the fetus is developed. But maybe other scientists have different results, as you shared.
Yeah, what's that called when people have different opinions?
Perceptions? I don't know.
Impermanence, right? If you go out on the internet, you'll find people that will tell you it's not a living being all the way, starting, maybe some people say it's a living being as soon as there's conception. And there's some people that tell you it's not a living being until it's actually born, right? And you'll see a lot of things in between. But what you're interested in doing is not just believing what the internet tells you. Don't just believe what your sister tells you. Don't believe those kinds of things. Instead, investigate this for yourself so that you know for yourself. So first, penetrate into dependent origination so that you understand that really, really well. And then look to see when are the 6 sense bases formed. That's where once you verify dependent origination and you understand that, yes, this is true, and you also independently verify the 5 aggregates and you know that that's true, then it's just a matter of figuring out when is these 6 sense bases formed in the womb, which there's plenty of scientists and there's research that shows that because they can now put cameras into the womb of a woman. They can do ultrasounds and all these other things. They can tell you exactly, they give a window of 2 to 6 weeks is when the 6 sense bases are forming. So you need to be able to go out and see this for yourself, and don't believe what you're seeing here or there, because you're going to see all kinds of different perspectives. You need to be able to know for yourself.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it actually was about 6 sense bases. I remember now. That was a question. But I see, it's just impermanence. But actually, I had another question here. So.
Let me add one other thing, Leo. Whenever you're doing this kind of research, you're going to see lots of different perspectives. So it's important that you use multiple sources and you look for the validation in those sources. That's what you would like to be able to do, because you obviously haven't done it yourself, where you've taken 1,000 women and you haven't done the research yourself to see when these things are being created. But if you have confidence in a particular group of scientists or a particular study that has happened, or you look at multiple sources and multiple sources are corroborating with the same evidence, that's where you can have confidence that, yes, this is true, because you're not doing the research yourself.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna check that. It's interesting. So what I actually wanted to ask, as you shared, that everything comes back to the ignorance, and the antidote is wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So in the wisdom section is right view and right intention. But I think with wisdom, we also talk about all the other things, right? Learning the wisdom of how to meditate and wisdom of all the other steps. Is that right?
Yeah, the elimination of ignorance is occurring through multiple things. Is one, there needs to be intellectual learning of multiple teachings. Then there needs to be reflection to independently verify, but then there needs to be a practice. You're not eliminating ignorance until your practice has been improved. So, for example, someone can intellectually understand that drugs and alcohol are unwise to ingest, but because of their cravings, they're still doing it. So that means there's still ignorance in the mind. Even though they intellectually understand, they're not actually practicing it, so there's still ignorance. So the way ignorance gets eliminated is that through your practice of actually changing the way you make decisions, because now you're fully wise and you're making decisions with that wisdom in mind. So the intellectual learning needs to happen. Then there's the reflection, the independent verification, but then it's the practice where ignorance is fully eliminated, because that's where the choices and decisions are being made right after the ignorance. So if you still have ignorance, you will make choices and decisions that are unwise. And that's where someone can intellectually understand it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol, but their choices and decisions are still to use drugs and alcohol because their mind's not fully wise to what they're actually doing to themselves.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. All right, Vibhav, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, if you can go back to the previous chapter.
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is the first time that actually I understood what you were trying to say here on this particular one. Is this dependent origination is describing how, like, the cause and effect and how karma works, right? So basically because of the chain, when something exists and something else comes to be is because any action that you're taking, whether wholesome or unwholesome, is going to produce, either is going to produce another, like a result or effect of that action. And so if you're taking so this is basically, let me try to state what I'm trying to say is that if you're taking any action that you take in this world is going to have the wholesome and unwholesome result associated with it, right? So if you're producing any action that you take, any feeling that you have, any thought that you get, that is going to be your karma that is going to be produced. And so this is basically what you always talk about as the cause and effect relationship, and that everything is karma, right? This is basically the dependent origination describes that law of karma that way, right? Dependent
origination is based on the law of karma, and the law of karma is at play. But dependent origination is a separate natural law from the natural law of karma, but it's the umbrella of the natural laws of existence and then the natural law of karma and dependent origination, they're all under this similar umbrella, but this is a separate natural law from the natural law of karma. But you can obviously see the cause and effect relationship because everything is based on cause and effect. So the natural law of karma encompasses everything. This is a more detailed version in helping you to be able to see the intricacies of a particular aspect of the natural law of karma.
Okay, and so in this case, the cause and effect is directly for this particular when you're talking about dependent generation as a subset of law of karma, this only this describes the effect of the 12 interlinking steps.
Yes. Where the natural law of karma is much more encompassing, where this is like one specific aspect of that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll follow up with you offline.
Okay, sounds good. So it looks like Yihang has a question.
I have a question about maybe just the language part of the description of the dependent origination. There you said if you dismantle the ignorance and then all the 12 linking steps are eliminated. But for the volitional formations, I'm not sure if I should understand it as the unwholesome volitional formations will be eliminated, but the wholesome volitional formations will still exist.
Yes, that's the way to understand it. That you're no longer making unwise decisions because now you've got wisdom here instead. So as an enlightened being, when you've fully dismantled this, you're no longer experiencing this cascading of events, but now instead of ignorance, you have wisdom. And that wisdom, you're still making choices and decisions as an enlightened being. It's just that they're now based in wisdom. And there is still a consciousness during the rest of this life. There still is a physical body. There still is 6 sense bases. There still is contact, but you're no longer experiencing conditioned feelings. You're no longer experiencing craving and clinging. There is an existence in this life, and you've already had your birth. The body is experiencing aging, but by the time you get to the end of this life, we don't call it death anymore. We call it final enlightenment, and we can talk about that if you guys would like. And you're no longer experiencing the discontentedness either. So dismantling this is to eliminate the ignorance, but you're still going to be experiencing some of these things while you're still in this last life as an enlightened being. It's just that now all of the stuff is being based in wisdom rather than the ignorance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, let me check Facebook and YouTube. It looks like Mayu Lee has a question on Facebook. Teacher, as I mentioned to you in the past that I have memorized and able to recite the entire dependent origination with full understanding, my question is, when I reflect on this on a regular basis, can I just reflect on when this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises? When this does not exist, that does not come to be, with the elimination of this, that is eliminated. This mind knows that when reciting on this, it covers the entire 12 interlinking steps, or should I recite the entire 12 interlinking steps each time? Hope I'm making sense. Thank you, teacher. If you've already memorized dependent origination and you already deeply understand it and penetrate into it, you don't need to keep reciting it over and over and over again. Just make sure that your mind understands those 12 interlinking steps. The Buddha calls it the wisdom of principle and the wisdom of entailment. What wisdom of principle is that you understand what each one of these things are. That's wisdom of principle, that you understand what ignorance is, that you understand what volitional formations are, that you understand what a consciousness is, that you understand what name and form is. That's wisdom of principle. Wisdom of entailment is understanding how one thing leads to another. So if you understand what each one of these are individually, and you understand that one thing leads to another, and you can remember that, that's what the Buddha teaches you to be able to memorize, because that's what's going to fully inform your practice. And now you can navigate the world with this dependent origination, because if ever there's a time that your 6 sense bases are experiencing contact and you notice that there's a feeling arising, you know, oh my goodness, craving is coming next. Let me cut that conditioned feeling off so I don't keep experiencing this craving, right? Because otherwise that's going to lead to my sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So this is where, like, having this memorized, you can now use it skillfully in your day-to-day life. But if you didn't have it memorized, you wouldn't be able to. So wisdom of principle is to remember each individual thing, what that is. And then wisdom of entailment is how one thing leads to another and what that sequencing is. And if you understand that and you've already memorized that, done. Off to the next thing, whatever it is that you need to learn and grow and develop. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is just end class by thanking all of you guys. And thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for the wonderful discussion and the politeness and respect that you guys have to each other and with me during our conversations. This is wonderful. And at the same time, next week, we're going to be finishing out this book. We're going to be going from chapters 41 to 46. So we're just going to explore those 6 chapters. And then we're going to be moving into the thickest book in the entire book series that we're probably going to be in for a good 4 to 5, maybe 6 months. It's the volume 11. It's the realms of existence. We're going to be diving into each of the individual realms and the cycle of rebirth. So that's the book after this one. But next week, it's just going to be chapters 41 through 46. And tomorrow, we're going to be restarting our group learning program from the very beginning. If you haven't been learning or you haven't studied with me before, this is a great opportunity for you to start from the very beginning. Or if you have learned, this is a good time for you to refresh your understanding of those teachings. If you would like to step in on some of those classes or all of those classes, we're going to be starting from the very beginning tomorrow. And if you have friends or family that are interested in learning, that's a great time for them to start. So I'm going to be starting that tomorrow. Then on Monday, I'm going to be starting a 5-day course, which is the typical course that I teach every month, which is the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course. And that's going to help students to really develop a nice foundation in the path to enlightenment. And as you guys know, all these things are live streamed and recorded, so you can attend these either live or you can watch the recordings. So thank you again, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee ka. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.